Hey everybody in the reggae universe, welcome to a conversation in dub hosted by me, Mark Ramondi.
And me, James Pasqua. This podcast is all about exploring the massive world of reggae and dub music, from its roots in Jamaica to its influence on various music genres worldwide.
This podcast also explores the intricacies of dub through insightful conversations, interviews with artists, and in-depth analysis of iconic tracks. We don't just talk about the music, but also the stories behind it, the techniques used in its production, and the social and political context that shaped its development.
Our goal is to promote mindful listening, taking you, the listener, on the journey the artist intended. Through this process, we hope to introduce you to new music or give you a new insight on music you already know and love.
This podcast is brought to you by Rootfire, a platform for reggae music worldwide with a mission to empower artists and nurture the community that supports them. You're here because you love reggae music and want to be a part of that community. We're here to help connect the dots.
If you have any feedback for us, be sure to email us at aconversationindub@gmail.com or message us on Facebook or Instagram at aconversationindub. We love hearing from you. Now,
let's get to the show. Well, hello there, my friend. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty fantastic. How you doing?
I am doing wonderful. And a big hello to everybody out there listening today. We are pumped to come at you with another episode today. Getting some time in to listen to some dub, break some things down, listen to something awesome today. And also just to kind of like unwind a little bit and listen to some music, man. I've been dying for this. We're like knee deep with wedding planning, and helping people move and doing things. So it's been nothing but organization and moving and going and going and going. So it's kind of nice to just take a second and hold things down. I found that any music that's been playing for me over the past couple weeks has been background noise. And I'm excited to make it take the front seat a little bit today.
Well, got a good one for you today, if you want to get right into it.
Absolutely, man. Let's break some things down.
We are featuring a band we probably should have featured a long time ago. It's just one of those things, you can't get to everybody right away. We are, of course, talking about Fishbone, one of the monumental ska-punk bands of all time, of course. Bands like Sublime and No Doubt and all these other bands that we know and love would not exist if it had not been for Fishbone. If you're not familiar with Fishbone, you're going to go for a ride today. We're not going to pick one of the more insane tracks for you. We're going to pick a nice ska tune that I always have on I think it's on most of my playlists is this song. We're talking about Unyielding Conditioning from the 1993 album Give a Monkey a Brain and He'll Think He's the Center of the Universe. That kind of sums up the band right there for you. So
I love it.
You want to get right into it?
Yeah, man. Let's just jump in.
You can find this song on all streaming platforms. You can find it on YouTube. You can put on the record or the CD or tape cassette yourself. But we're going to listen right now. We'll be back in a minute. That was Unyielding Conditioning by Fishbone. And just to give everyone some context, we previewed a little bit of the album too.
Yeah.
Because if you're not familiar with the album, I suggest you do that. Because the rest of the album sounds nothing like the song we just listened to. Nothing. If you are familiar with the album, you already know that Unyielding Conditioning is like the far left turn from the rest of the album. It doesn't sound like that at all.
Wow.
So the album is Give a Monkey a Brain and He'll Think He's the Center of the Universe. Came out in 1993. What do you think of that song, Mark?
I'll be honest. It's been a minute since I've heard this track.
Yeah.
It's been a minute. And I regret that. I don't know. There's something mesmerizing, I think, about Fishbone.
Yeah.
That is really different because I feel like these guys have a different connection to the idea of music as a whole than your typical reggae band or even your typical band, period. I really do. I think they have a different relationship with their ability to feel what a song is trying to say rather than push a musical intention on a group of people.
Yeah, it doesn't. What I get from Fishbone, I agree. What I get from Fishbone is that they are not trying to fit in any genre,
No.
and they're
No.
not trying to make a genre.
No.
They are trying to
They're
just be who they are and bring all of their influences and make it Fishbone. And they've done that through the years that they've been a band.
what's so funny, and like, the universe works in some crazy ways. The one thing that I have found, me personally, I've been stringing through my teachings this week, because as for a lot of you guys out there that don't know, I teach piano. Okay, so that's
What?
out there. But like, yeah, I got a bunch of
That's
students
news.
around the world. They're doing great things. But one thing that I have been nailing home to everybody this week, particularly before we even decided to do this track and talk about it, is that music comes through you, not from you. And that is something that I feel like a lot of musicians get out of touch with because they're trying to think what they're creating and what they need to bring into this world and how that needs to fit their idea of what their genre and their sound is, versus you get a group of musicians like this which understand that they are just going to communicate and let it ride. Like, it sounds like they're talking to each other through their instruments and just vibing off of that moment and vibing off of what can happen and what's necessary for the moment of the piece to grow and sound full, versus like, what are they going to theoretically write down and jot down on a piece of paper before they get in the room to make come together and sound like something. Like, these musicians don't just play very well, they listen exceptionally well, which makes them understand how to communicate. And you hear it. You hear the way things are talking to it, and you hear that they're not afraid to pull from any bit of influence at any moment in time, whether it's a rock influence, whether it's a funk influence, whether it's the jazziest, most soulful R&B track you're going to lay down with vocals and harmonies that's going to flow into this grunge ska-punk sound that they're going, like, it doesn't matter, because they're not thinking about what to do when. They're just thinking, what does the music require right now? And they fill that gap every single turn.
Yeah. And I
It's
also
wild.
wonder if Angelo Moore, who is the singer, saxophone player, if he is conducting the band in a way that George Clinton would conduct a band or James Brown would conduct a band,
Yep.
Like, is it like,
Yep.
here, hit it here, stop here, Or is it
You
like
know-
everyone just coming together with their thing and they make this wild product called Fishbone?
It's interesting that you say that. I'm getting the vibe that he does it without doing it because of the intonation of his vocals. Because
I'm not saying that they would do that live in the studio and record it. I'm saying, like, in general, as a band leader.
it's but it's almost like you can hear in the sound of his voice when he's switching into something more jazzy, or when he's switching into something more upbeat that has a little bit more crunch to it, when he's going into something smooth. Like, I felt like he was conducting the show, but in a way of just honestly communicating the melody differently in different ways. And that was like mind-bending for me, because it was so appropriate. It was so good, and it was so different, and it became so unbelievably cohesive. And there's something else about these tracks that I do want to talk about, because I've been down the rabbit hole. I think I mentioned this to you. There's these two books that audio books that I've been listening to recently. They're both by the amazing Victor Wooten, who is just possibly one of the best bassists to ever bass ever, and of so much props to him. But he wrote this book called The Music Lesson, and then he followed it up with this book called The Spirit of Music, which I'm on right now. And I gotta say, like for musicians out there or for educators, if you are an absolutely experienced musician or if you are new into the world of being a musician but absolutely love and have a passion for music, these books have the opportunity to completely change the trajectory of your life as a musician. Because what they've done for me as a musician and as a teacher and as a person, I can't speak highly enough to it. But because I'm pulling everything I'm hearing and I'm relating it to this. And in the book, The Spirit of Music, there's a whole chapter dedicated to how, the spirit of music, what's happened to a lot of music, and like how, a lot of tracks use things like different things like auto tune, and they use things like compression. They use things like just different things to tighten up the sound of it, right? But what happens through that is you lose the same intimacy that you have and the connection that you can have with the musician that you get at like a live performance or things like that. When you hear the artistry behind this and when you hear the instrumentals and just the vocals in this, not every pitch would be your expected pitch. Not every vocal tone is completely as sharp as it would need to be. That's what makes it special. I feel like as someone listening to this, if you do a listen through with something like this versus something that you'd like that's auto-tuned, because I'm not saying that stuff that's auto-tuned that uses stuff like that is bad. It's not about good versus bad. What I'm getting to is connection. I feel a different connection to the artist when I hear something that sounds this raw, this natural, and this close to what the artist wants to do, can do, and is communicating, because all those little bends, all those little shifts hit so differently and pull you as a listener so differently to make you feel something different. So like, this is such an easy band, I feel like, for their listeners to connect with and really feel an intimate connection with them, almost as if you know them so well, just by hearing them bear everything that they possibly can out on these songs. You hear it in the vocals, but it doesn't stop there. You hear it in the instrumental solos and how they speak to each other. You hear it in the sax. Is that a baritone sax that was just ripping that piece to shreds?
Yeah,
right?
Angela Moore plays the baritone.
Oh my God. It's that. How often do you hear a baritone just rip through a track like that? You know what I mean? But it was so good. It worked so well. It gave it this crunchiness and this texture that just was what the piece required. So like, this is one of those intimate types of sounds that I feel like anybody that can appreciate music could sit down and be like, wow, there's some magic happening right here. I almost refuse to believe that this is all pre-orchestrated and choreographed to a T, because of how unbelievable the communication is between the instruments and how unbelievable the moments just fit together like a glove. You know what I mean?
Now, when you say that, are you saying that you don't think that it was heavily rehearsed first?
No, I think that this goes back to the chemistry thing that we talk about. You know what I mean? I think that these guys have played together and understand each other so much to the point where there is room for them to be them individually as they come together as a whole. And that individualistic attitude is coming through in their recording process. Like, I do think all this stuff was unbelievably played through. I want to use a different word than rehearsed, because it doesn't sound like this is a band that's like, we're going to get there and we're going to drill it. This sounds like it's a band that's like, we're going to get there and we're going to be. I don't think they needed to work hard to do something like this. They just had to work passionately, because of how skilled they already were to do something like this. You can't perform and do something like that if you are not an insanely skilled musician, not only in the art of playing, but in the art of listening and hearing. So I think when these guys come together to do this happens like butter. But I don't think that solo would sound exactly the same every single time you go to hear them live. Or I think there's definitely some not. Licks. I think they're like, that's what I mean. Like, you hear the independence of each musician when it comes to stuff like this, which is what I love, because there's so much more trust in that element of music, where you're trusting each other to fill the gaps. You're trusting each other to hear what's going on. You know what I mean? There's something about this that sounds incredibly natural for these guys, based on maybe how much they've played together, the skill that they have, but just the level of which they're able to listen and communicate. Yeah.
And remember, it's 1993. So they didn't have the technology we have today where you can piece things together and all that. It was I'm sure it was recorded to tape, which, has its own sound. And in the early 90s, all that music sounded so good.
So good.
Because the technology was like maxed out to recording the tape, that everything just sounded so clean and warm and natural. Whereas after that, we kind of lost that a bit, and hopefully going back to it. But
True.
1993, I mean, you look at what else is going on in the music world. I mean, some of the
Yeah.
greatest, so, people would say some of the greatest albums of all time came out
Yep.
in like 1993, 1994.
Yeah.
The grunge
That's
days,
fair.
the rock revival days, Nirvana, Pearl Jam,
Yep.
Alanis Morissette, all these huge names were right there at that time. And here you have Fishbone doing their thing, and they're just doing whatever they want. They're just like cutting through the scene.
Yeah. Yeah, but like it's just you really can feel something like this. Like it just I loved it. I love every bit of this. This is such an amazing track and such a cool album. Like I mean like honestly like if just for fun, if you all have like 5 minutes out there, literally just do what we did and just do a snippet of different songs from this album. You're just going to be like, "What?
I mean, this
What
is
is
this
this?"
is their fourth studio album, and it's like
Yeah.
a metal album.
Yeah.
They've always teased it in their previous stuff, like, oh yeah, we can get pretty heavy. This album's like, no, we're gonna be a metal band now and do some
Yep.
ska songs here and there.
And do it really well.
To me, Fishbone is like a melting pot of Bad Brains, Parliament, and Madness.
Yes.
If
Absolutely.
they had a baby
Absolutely.
together, it would be
Absolutely.
Fishbone.
No, I agree. I think that like, well, I know what I'm gonna be doing the rest of today in terms of the rabbit hole that I'm gonna go down. But like, man, like we talk so much about tracks that take you on a trip. Unavoidable. That trip is unavoidable. I don't think this is something that could ever be like. It's funny that we started this episode and I was like, oh yeah, I've been listening to the music as background music for the longest time. I don't know if this could be background music. I don't know.
It can't be.
This is it's one of those tracks where if it comes on, you take a second and you're like, oh, there's something happening here. You know what I mean? Like we're all here for that intentional musical listening. You don't have to try that hard with Fishbone to be intentional about how you listen to that.
No. And as a drummer, every time I hear that song, I'm like, man, I need to work on my stamina, because what he's doing on those drums in this song alone is fast. It's funky. There's all those subdivisions on the hi-hats. There's just like constant.
But it's precise, man.
Like I can't imagine what that studio day looked like if they had to do multiple takes of this song, because man, after one I'd be like, I'm done.
Yeah. It's true.
It's just wild.
Even think just inserting that in a set list.
Yeah. Like in
that's
the middle
crazy.
of songs, because how long was the song? Like 5 minutes?
What had to be no. If it was 5 minutes, that went by like that felt like it was 2.5 to 3 minutes.
4 minutes 46 seconds.
Wow, that put me on a time machine too. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That went by like that. What a trip that was. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
But man, drummer's crazy. What Norwood Fisher's doing on that bass through the song too is just, it's all
Insane.
over the place, but it's
Insane.
fitting. It's one of those, like, he knows how to keep you entertained, but also fit the song, which is what you were saying before about the whole song in general.
Yeah, it's just I just felt like this is a really special band that does really special things, and it's a very big reason why people still talk about them, and they deserve it. And it's a reason why Fishbone songs are still on playlists and still on everyone's radar who's into this stuff. Like, I mean, it's crazy.
What's unfortunate is I feel like Fishbone never got their credit that they were deserved. Like I mentioned, I think before we listened to the song, bands like Sublime and No Doubt and all those bands wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Fishbone. I really truly believe that, and I feel like Fishbone is one of those cult following bands where, like, if you love Fishbone, you love Fishbone and you get it. But if you're like on the outside and you're like, oh yeah, I've heard of Fishbone, cool, like, you don't get what they did for music and how active they were as a band.
That's true. That's very fair. I feel like, it's so easy to take them out of context and be like, wow, that's a killer track. But like, to think about when they started doing things like this and how they started doing it, it's like, it's pretty insane when you think about it. Because when they were doing this, nobody was doing this.
Well, I mean, they formed in '79, and the two-tone revolution already happened in the UK, like right around then. So they were obviously listening to what was going on there and doing that. But the States, they weren't ready for that. And
No.
Fishbone's first few albums were very much, to that context of like two-tone, but also funky, like Parliament was.
Yeah.
And I think, like, we weren't ready for that yet. And then bands were listening to that as fans and changed it a bit, and you have what we now have as ska-punk,
That's fair. You're absolutely right.
But like
But
they were pioneers
the
of
trailblazers
that.
of this sound.
Yeah. And I
It's
don't
pretty
think they
amazing.
get their credit. I think they deserve a lot more accolades than they have.
Well, you know what? This could be a platform of accolades because I know everybody gonna be on here sharing their love for Fishbone after hearing this, especially if you ain't familiar with them. But talk about some conversations that would be amazing to be had on this podcast.
Yeah. And I looked at the lyrics for this song. I've heard this song so many times. It's on a lot of my playlists, like I said. I
Yeah.
never actually looked at the lyrics. I'm pretty sure what the song is about how people are afraid to speak up for what they believe in because they've been trained not to, because society tells them not to, so they don't. And they're telling you that you need to. And then knowing Fishbone and knowing what their general songs and bands are about, I'm pretty sure that's what they're saying to the people.
Yeah.
And this was 1993, and it is 110% relevant in today's social and political climate. So, with that said, go listen to Fishbone because they have a message that is still relevant, like 30 years and more later. So,
That's right.
and they're on tour. I am trying to go see them in September for, I don't know, third or fourth time. Amazing show. If you can go see Fishbone live, highly recommend because they put on a show that you're imagining.
That's so awesome. I love it. I love it. And I love that we can talk a little bit about, the meaning of what their message is too, because, that's definitely something that we're going to be trying to do a little bit more over here, right?
Yeah, we're going to try. We've said before, we don't listen to lyrics when we listen to music, especially for the first time. I know I can speak for Mark too. If I hear a song for the first time, lyrics is not even on my mind. It's just just happening. I'm treating it as if it's an instrument.
Yep, it's a melody for me.
And then, after a while, yeah, you get to know the lyrics. And then even after that, you get to know what it might be about.
What it ties together. After hearing the words, you get to process what they all mean together, right?
Yeah, like you haven't sang along to a song, you know all the words, and you're like, what's that song about? I have no idea.
No idea. That's exactly how it is, And it's an important thing. I mean, like, believe it or not, it's one of the things that kind of backs the impact of the song as well. And it's something that I'm trying to do and be more mindful myself. And it is just the difference too. I feel like we've had episodes on this podcast before we talk about how everybody listens differently. And that always intrigues me. I find that so interesting. And I went to a choir college where most of the people were like singers. They were all singing. So like, the message and the lyrics, that was everything. They wouldn't be able to tell you what instruments were on the track, but they could tell you what it said, what it was about, and the meaning behind it. And I was like, wow, almost as if we heard two totally different songs.
Yeah.
But it's important because we're here to talk about intentional musical listening and also to broaden and change what you're hearing sometimes out there, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Shift your focus. I think that's a really interesting thing that we really haven't gotten into, like the act of trying to shift what you're hearing, to hear everything that a song is about, because it all comes together to make this exquisite piece of art. And I feel like sometimes if you listen to only one thing about that piece of art, you don't really know what the whole thing looks like.
Fair.
So stuff to do, stuff to think about, and stuff to be excited about to get into too as we move on to some other songs and other tracks. But dude, Fishbone, awesome stuff. Absolutely incredible. Can't wait to go listen to the rest of that today.
Fishbone, Unyielding Conditioning. Put it on your playlist, especially going into summertime and you want to dance to something fun. That's the one.
Absolutely. That is the one, man. So that's going on the playlist, and that's going to be listened to later today, too. So everybody out there, I hope you guys enjoy this change of the season. If you're over on the East Coast like I am, we're pushing for spring, but boy, are we getting held back by some cold. So we're just itching our way over to it. But either way, I hope you guys all enjoy out there. Do some listening. And as always,
Keep dubbing.
keep dubbing.
Thanks for listening to A Conversation in Dub, hosted by James Pasqua and Mark Raimondi. Conversation in Dub is brought to you by Rootfire, a platform for reggae music worldwide with a mission to empower artists and nurture the community that supports them. You're here because you love reggae music and want to be a part of that community? We're here to help you connect the dots.
This show is produced and edited by James Pasqua. Our theme music is an original composition called Keep Dubbing by James Pasqua and Mark Raimondi. If you want to hear previous episodes containing full songs, you can find them all on Spotify. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at A Conversation in Dub. And if you have any feedback, requests, or just want to talk about music, reach out there or email us at aconversationindub@gmail.com. Make sure to rate us on your podcast platform of choice. And as always, keep dubbing.